Hello, everyone, and welcome to Medical Astrology 101. In this free workshop, you're going to get a really solid understanding and framework for learning and practicing medical astrology. This also serves as a small sample of what you're going to be learning in Medical Astrology Mastery if you choose to join us. And of course, right now, Medical Astrology Mastery is open for enrollment, and you'll get 30% off if you join us before 11:59 p.m. on February 11th, but we'll talk a little bit more about that later. For now, I really just want to dive into the material. And so this is basically a slightly altered version of a workshop that I used to do a couple of years ago, where I made more of a hoopla about it. Everyone had to sign up in advance. It was a whole big thing. I decided to pare it down and make it more appropriate for YouTube so I could share it with all of you without you having to jump through any hoops to get this information because it's super valuable. And I know a lot of you will be interested in just at least dipping your toes in the water with medical astrology. Medical astrology is so useful for understanding your own health needs, your own wellness plans. It's also very helpful if you are a professional astrologer because medical astrology helps you answer those questions that people come in with about their health, about illness, about their spouse's health. That's actually a pretty common thing as an astrologer to get questions that come up during a reading about health or about how to, prevent illness, things like that. And so this will help you to get at least a framework for some of the basic significations for medical astrology and for how we actually structure medical astrology. It's very different from regular natal astrology. There are a whole different slew of significations and techniques that are just very specific to this branch of astrology. And so, without further ado, let's get into it. And so, this training is for you if you have been trying to learn medical astrology, but the resources that you're finding are kind of incomplete all over the place, or sometimes too advanced, just jumping right into advanced concepts like disease patterns and things like that without giving you a solid structured framework to build off of. Obviously, if you're looking for a structured, easy to understand approach to learning and practicing medical astrology, I am the one to come to for that. I'm sure there are other teachers out there, but my thing is always making sure that everything is structured in a way where you can layer the information, integrate it step by step, and actually turn it into a cohesive astrology reading, and in this case, a medical astrology reading. If you are ready to learn to confidently use medical astrology in your own life or help others navigate their healing, this is for you. If you're an astrologer, especially a practicing astrologer or a student of astrology who has at least a basic understanding of natal chart interpretation and transits, then this is for you. If you are a student of the Cosmic Academy of Astrology, I know there's a lot of you out there and you have completed both level 1 and level 2, you are ready to dive into medical astrology. And even if you're not quite there for this particular workshop, as long as you have a basic understanding of the signs, planets, and houses, this will help you to understand some of the medical astrology significations and how it all starts to come together later on when you do have that natal interpretation background, because medical astrology really requires a background in natal astrology first before diving in. This is also for you if you are a highly motivated, self disciplined, responsible student who's willing to participate in the learning process actively. Astrology in general is only 50% book learning, the rest is experiential. It requires a lot of actual experience and working with the charts and doing things out in the world, making mistakes, troubleshooting, all of it. And medical astrology is no different. You do have to actively participate and practice in order to learn. And obviously, at the end of this, I'm going to be talking about Medical Astrology Mastery and the enrollment opportunities that are happening right now. This was formerly known as Medical Astrology Foundations, but we actually changed the name last year to better reflect the content of the course because it is not foundational. It's not for beginners. It's very advanced, and you can build an entire medical astrology practice just from this program alone. All right. So, what do you need for this? It would be ideal if you had your own birth chart handy or the birth chart of someone you love who maybe you want to help. We also have my Medical Astrology 101 quick reference guide available for free download at the link down in the description below this video. Make sure you download that because a lot of the significations we're talking about today are on that worksheet, and some of them are even more fleshed out. That's really handy for you to have. And there's also spaces in there for you to take notes along the way, or just grab a pen and notebook and keep it simple. That's completely okay too. Either one is fine with me. What you're going to learn today is how medical astrology really works and how it doesn't work. So, like, what is medical astrology and what is it not? That's important because there's a lot of weirdness around that on the internet today. The internet is a wild place where people do all sorts of things. And so, we're going to get clarity real quick before we dive in. We're also going to talk about the planets, signs, and houses in medical astrology and their unique connection to health and wellness. We'll talk about the zodiac signs and how they correspond to different organ systems in the body. We'll talk about the most critical medical astrology houses. All the houses are applicable in medical astrology, just to let you know, but there are four in particular that are extra important. So we'll get into that. We'll talk about the basic wellness evaluation technique, and we'll also get into disease signatures, which is how we evaluate and assess very specific patterns of illness, diagnoses that people come to us with. We don't diagnose illness in medical astrology, which you will learn in just a second here, but people will come to you often when they have a diagnosis and they're completely just out of ideas. Nothing has helped them. They are desperate. And this is where medical astrology can find different insights and connections that other modalities might not have access to. But it's definitely not a replacement for healthcare or professional medical advice. And so, in return, I ask that you are kind and respectful to everyone in the chat, that you close all of the tabs on your computer and give this workshop your undivided attention so you don't miss anything. I was talking to my students in Celestial Self Care just last weekend about how multitasking is not a real thing. The research shows that time and time again, you can only truly understand and do one thing at a time really well. Even if you're neurodivergent, it's actually been shown that no, you can't multitask better. It actually increases your symptoms of things like ADHD. And so, what I would love is if you could keep your phone on airplane mode. If you're watching this on your phone, just, no scrolling. And also put your phone away. So it's also been shown that if your phone is in eyesight, your attention span shortens just by having your phone near you. And also it lowers your IQ temporarily to have your phone near you. And I want you to be smart and attentive for this workshop. We're not going to be answering any personal medical questions in the chat here today over on YouTube. That is for a variety of reasons. It's just completely irresponsible to do without seeing your birth chart, but also, there are legal reasons for that. Okay, so why learn medical astrology? So there's a lot of different reasons that you might want to learn medical astrology. Um, Okay, good. I want to make sure I have the right version of this because I have a couple different versions here. So, there are a lot of different reasons why you might want to learn medical astrology. Maybe you are an astrologer and you want to up-level your existing skill set and add a new type of reading to your toolkit. Maybe you want to find answers and insights to your own health and healing. That's how I came across medical astrology because I was suffering from chronic illness for so long. Maybe you want to help your friends, your family, your loved ones, someone you care about. Or maybe you want to better serve your clients in your astrology practice. Maybe you don't want to become a medical astrologer, but the questions do arise and you want to make sure that you can care for people in a way that's ethical, responsible, and still gives them really good guidance that they can kind of take to their healthcare provider. Maybe you are a healer of some kind and you want to combine medical astrology with an herbalism practice that's very common, or with some sort of energy work. those things, we have so many students in Medical Astrology Mastery who are nutritionists, herbalists, energy healers, Reiki masters, massage therapists, personal trainers. I think I might have already said nutritionists. We even have some MDs and some naturopaths and other types of doctors. So you're in good company if that's you. Let me know in the chat why you want to learn more about medical astrology, why you're showing up here for this live premiere today. And keep your answers in mind as we go through the workshop. So, what is your why? What are you struggling with when it comes to learning medical astrology? And what would your life look like, ideally, when you start to practice medical astrology? Okay. And so, before we dive in, I swear we're getting started in just a second here while you guys are funneling in. I'm just going to reintroduce myself for those who don't know me well. My name is Heather Eland. I am a professional astrologer and medical astrologer and educator. I'm the founder of the Cosmic Academy of Astrology and the Cosmic Wellness Academy, and the creator of the Medical Astrology Mastery program. I have a master's degree in clinical psychology and a background in herbalism, mind body therapies, and holistic health. And I came to medical astrology within the first couple of years of actually studying astrology. I began studying astrology back in 2011, 2012. And really, as soon as I learned medical astrology existed, I was all in on that because I was dealing with chronic illness. I was suffering from chronic fatigue syndrome, all sorts of mysterious symptoms. Later, I found out I had chronic Lyme disease. And also, even more later on, when I started to recover from that, I developed mast cell activation syndrome and histamine intolerance. And medical astrology has been a big part in navigating my recovery. It's not the only thing I used. I had a lot of really great alternative practitioners on my side because the mainstream medical system didn't know what to do with me and mostly just terrified the crap out of me, to be honest. But I have a lot of open-minded people that I've been working with for many years now. And between what I was discovering in my chart, what I was telling them, and what they were seeing, we were able to create a plan where I am now healthy and functioning. Whereas maybe 10, 12 years ago, I was so sick that I could barely get up to just do a load of dishes. So I am here. I am teaching astrology. I am well. I get to, do exercise and do my Pilates classes and take care of my animals and have this beautiful astrology practice and help all of you. And again, medical astrology was a big part in guiding that journey, which is why I am so passionate about helping astrologers and students learn to confidently incorporate medical astrology into their astrology practice. All right. So, the foundations for the way that I'm going to be teaching this is that the brain and body are not separate entities. The brain is an organ in the body, just like your heart, just like your liver, just like anything else. It is a part of your body. And so treating the brain as separate from the body doesn't make any sense. In fact, the brain and body are probably even more interconnected because the brain signals the body and tells it how to function, and it receives signals from the body that tells the brain how to function. There is an interaction going on here. And so the significant health breakthroughs can come through working on improving the health of the brain and strengthening the mind body connection. A lot of psychological work and behavioral work and environmental work can actually play a role in your healing in ways that you might not otherwise understand until you look at it through a medical astrology lens. And that was something that rang really true for me. And that was really true for me in my own healing journey. So, medical astrology there are different things I need to talk to you about here. So, like, how does medical astrology work? What does it do? What is its benefits? Medical astrology shows us how different symptoms and patterns of disease and issues pertaining to the physical body are connected to literally every other single thing in our life. It's not just about specific like diet and exercise and supplements and things like that, although you can get information about that. It's about how what you're experiencing physically is connected to seemingly unrelated things in your life, like your career path or that argument that you keep having with your sister or, some other thing that's like random in your life that you wouldn't otherwise be able to understand the connection. So medical astrology helps you see these connections between past trauma, emotional upsets, psychological patterns, behavioral patterns, and also just experiences that you're having in your life and how they might be impacting your body in ways that you're not fully aware of. And so I love, love, love medical astrology for that because not a lot of other modalities can really do that in the way medical astrology can. And that is a big missing piece to a lot of people's um, healing puzzle. What medical astrology doesn't do is it doesn't diagnose or treat illness. And so historically, medical astrology was part of the professional practice of medicine, especially in the medieval and Renaissance era. In certain areas in Europe, medical astrology education was required if you were to become a physician. But that's obviously not what we do today. And you can get in a lot of trouble for doing those things today. And we also don't want to be diagnosing people, right? That's not our job. People come to us because they already have some sort of issue. They're probably very aware of their diagnosis. They probably Google searched all the things. What we're here to do is to provide additional layers of insight that they don't already have. And so that's what medical astrology does. And so let's move into my disclaimer. Medical astrology is an ancient technical art that involves the interpretation of celestial omens. Medical astrology is not a substitute for professional medical advice or other forms of healthcare. The information provided in this lecture is for educational purposes only. I am not diagnosing or treating the physical body, and I am not teaching you to diagnose or treat the physical body, which falls under the jurisdiction and expertise of licensed medical healthcare providers. You should always consult your healthcare provider to discuss the diagnosis and treatment of any physiological or psychological illness. The exact benefits and risks of medical astrology are not fully known. As such, all methods taught by me are merely experimental and cannot promise to deliver specific results or achieve specific outcomes. All right, so now we're ready to start learning. So, the signs, planets, houses, and aspects in medical astrology kind of mirror the way that they work in regular astrology, but they're slightly different. Because what we really need here is to look at how this connects to the physical body and how this creates a pattern that shows us what a person needs and what might be harming them, causing weakness versus strengthening them. And so in medical astrology, the signs are connected to different body parts. So a lot of you are probably familiar with the astrology wheel of the body, where Aries is the head, and then you have Taurus being like the jaw, and we have Gemini being the lungs, and so on and so forth. So you get down to Pisces being the feet. It's a little bit more than that. So we'll show you exactly how deep it goes, and also make sure you download the Medical Astrology 101 quick reference guide. It gives you all of the significations. It's much more than just head to toe, although that is definitely a part of it. And the signs also show us how and where the planetary energies are being expressed, because the planets are actions within the body, but they're also influences on different body parts and organ systems that are connected to the signs. So it's like a filter, but it's also an energy of this is also a part of the body, and the planets might be influencing it. So it works both ways. The planets represent the actions within the body, bodily functions, the functions of different organ systems, especially the organ systems ruled by the planets in traditional astrology and even in modern astrology to a certain extent. And so that's another thing that's a little bit different that we're looking at. The houses provide context. So they show us external environmental influences and how they're connected to different patterns of illness and wellness. But there are certain houses, four in particular, that have stronger health implications than others. So we'll be talking about that a little bit more today. The aspects, just as in natal astrology, show how planetary influences interact. It shows areas of strength as well as areas more prone to difficulties with health. And so obviously positive aspects are going to be more wellness promoting typically, and challenging aspects are typically going to be weakening or challenging in some way. And in addition to this, all of the normal significations and interpretations that you would give in a general astrology reading still apply. And so this is where you get to layer the medical component and the body and the health component with that natal component to see how everything connects and interacts. And that's, again, the thing that's really special with medical astrology. And one of the reasons why you need an astrology background to study and practice medical astrology, but also because you're just not going to really understand what the heck is going on. This is more complicated, it's more advanced. And so you do want to have a good background. Okay, so we talked about the zodiac signs being connected to specific organ systems and body areas. Let me know in the chat if you're already kind of aware of the Aries down to Pisces, head to toe significations of the zodiac. Most people who have studied astrology even a little bit are. But something you might not be aware of is that there are way more significations here. And so, for example, hello, hello, hello. Hello? Okay. Was that not working that whole time? Oh no. Okay, so for example, Aries, I'm just going to double check that it's working. Okay. For example, Aries rules the head, including the eyes and upper jaw, but it also is connected to the adrenals and sympathetic nervous system. And there are going to be connections between all of the zodiac signs and the other signs of the same modality and their influences, which we'll talk about in just a second. It's called a referred influence, or at least that's what I call it in medical astrology. And so the cardinal signs have a lot to do with the endocrine system, for example. Taurus is the lower jaw, tongue, throat, tonsils, neck, thyroid gland, vocal cords, and parts of the brain stem. So, like this whole region, but all of the things in it, not just the neck. Gemini is obviously the lungs, respiratory system, shoulders, arms, hands, fingers, but also the ears. Hearing is connected to Gemini and Mercury. The nerves are connected to Gemini primarily. Cancer is connected to the chest, the breasts, uterus, and womb. So, like, a little farther down, or ovarian hormones. Ovaries are co-ruled between Cancer and Libra. The stomach is a Cancer rulership. Any sac or mucous membrane in the body is going to be ruled by Cancer and connected to the moon. The limbic system is connected to Cancer because it's connected to the moon. The moon rules over the limbic system and its function, and like the moon is the ruler of Cancer. Cancer is also connected to the meninges, the posterior pituitary gland. So, the posterior pituitary gland is Cancer. The anterior pituitary gland is its opposite sign, Capricorn, and the pituitary gland is very tied in with the control of the endocrine system. And so, again, there's this referred influence we'll get to in a second here. Leo is the heart, we all know that, but also the thymus right here. It's a gland that has a lot to do with your immune system. It's the spinal cord, it's the back. It's also said to rule the cell nucleus because of its connection to the sun. Virgo is not just the nervous system and your gut, but it's also the spleen, pancreas, diaphragm. It's your intestines, especially small intestine, large intestine, colon. That's more Scorpio. It's the nervous system, especially the autonomic nervous system, which is your fight or flight response, and the enteric nervous system, which is the nervous system that is tied to your gut. It's your gut brain. It's the co-ruler of the liver. People think the liver is Sagittarius. I see way more liver issues come up that are connected to Virgo than Sagittarius. And also, it's the co-ruler of the immune system with Pisces. Libra is kidneys, hips, parts of the pancreas. So you'll sometimes see pancreas with Libra. I see it more commonly with Virgo. All of the homeostatic systems of the body, the generalized significator for the endocrine system is Libra. Ovaries and fallopian tubes, basically anything where there's two of something and it's like symmetrical, there's going to be a potential Libra component, especially if there are hormonal implications. Scorpio is the genitals, prostate, cervix, colon. It's your anus, urinary tract, sweat glands. It's also the reptilian brain. And it also, believe it or not, rules the nose and sinuses along with Mars. And so that's something a lot of people don't recognize because they're thinking of like down there and not like up here. But basically, anything in your body, well, not Yeah, most things I would say on this list, but anything in your body where things come out, but they're not really supposed to go in, or if they do, it's, that's your own business. Those are all Scorpio things. It's about purging, right? Sagittarius is liver, thighs. It's your butt, your lower spinal cord, your sacrum, sciatic nerve. It's also the hypothalamus is connected to Sagittarius as well. Capricorn is all of the Saturnian things, bones, joints, spine, teeth, hair, skin, nails. It also rules over the gallbladder along with Saturn, and it has to do with, like I mentioned before, the anterior pituitary gland. So sometimes hormonal issues can come from planets in Capricorn. Aquarius is the calves, ankles, the Achilles tendon. It's also the circulatory and venous system and the electrical systems of the body. It also rules over the balance of electrolytes in our body. And so Aquarius does have a lot to do with your cardiac and circulatory health, not just Leo. Pisces, of course, is the feet, but also is the lymphatic system. So it's kind of that opposite of Virgo, immune system and the lymphatic system, which is a huge part of our immune system. It's also our white blood cells, and it's the ruler of the pineal gland and also the appendix, which is kind of odd and interesting. Okay. And so, is my audio still working? Yes. So, the three modules have this sort of connection, or the three modalities, sorry, cardinal, fixed, and mutable. Each have their own connections to different bodily systems. So the cardinal signs deal with the endocrine system in general, and they also deal with crisis. And that's kind of its own thing psychologically when you see, like, let's say a grand cross, a grand cardinal cross, and that's being active at the onset of an illness, and you know that the pattern of that illness is connected to the cardinal signs, then you know that one of the psychological patterns could be dealing with crisis. Avoiding versus facing it head on is a common one. It's also conditions that are acute or worse at onset, whereas fixed signs are slow, enduring, chronic, things like that. Although it's not always the case, you really have to look at this through your own interpretive lens and through a certain level of nuance and understanding. The fixed signs are connected to the cardiovascular, excretory, and reproductive systems, but especially that cardiovascular and excretory systems. It deals with toxins and toxic buildup and even psychological toxicity, emotional toxicity. And it can indicate when there's patterns that are activated that there's sluggishness or an avoidance of forward momentum, holding on to something psychologically or emotionally that doesn't serve you. Mutable signs are connected to the entire nervous system across that axis and the entire lymphatic and immune system across that axis and the entire respiratory and digestive system across that axis, with the exception of the stomach being cardinal and obviously the colon and all of that being fixed. It deals with flexibility and fear around change, afraid of changing or things being afraid of changing or afraid of things staying the same and not being able to change. That can also off sorry, my my tongue is not saying the words. It can often be the psychological or emotional pattern that is connected to an illness that's in the mutable signs. And this is conditions that fluctuate in severity. When a cardinal energy is implicated at the time of onset, it can indicate things getting better, then getting worse, and it's kind of not a linear pattern. You'll see a lot of chronic illness with this because it follows that pattern. And it's also very tied in with the immune system, and you'll have like autoimmune things coming up and things like that. And so I don't know if anybody else teaches it this way or talks about it this way. I'm sure other medical astrologers have seen this because it's very obvious when you're working with clients and charts, but there are these referred influences. So signs of the same modality can refer their influences when it comes to the bodily systems and the bodily areas that are connected to them when you're looking at a pattern for health, wellness, or disease. And so basically, An example would be in the cardinal signs, any part of the endocrine system can be impacted by planets in a cardinal energy. So just because the planet in question is in Cancer, that does not mean that it can't be connected to issues pertaining to the bones, the joints. That doesn't mean that it can't be connected to issues pertaining to the endocrine system as a whole, or maybe the sympathetic nervous system, right? So there's this referred influence where you do really have to look at all of the connections in the cardinal signs to have a better understanding of what's actually going on here, because it might not just be specific to that sign. There is this referred influence across the modalities, across those squares, even if there aren't planets in those signs that are activated at all. So in the fixed signs, all of these, like a square opposition or even a standalone placement in any fixed sign, could impact the throat or the tonsils, the cardiovascular system, those types of things. In the mutable signs, literally planet anywhere could impact the immune system or the nervous system. So those are things to keep in mind because it works a little bit differently than what you might be used to in natal astrology. And this is just through direct experience in working with the charts that I've just seen this time and time again. It is a thing. And so I don't know why, but it is a thing. So just keep that in mind. And I think part of it is because all of these systems are interconnected. You can't look at one part of the nervous system without looking at the whole nervous system. You can't look at part of the endocrine system without looking at the whole endocrine system. You can't look at the part of the cardiovascular system without like looking at the whole. These things don't function only in isolation. The whole body doesn't function that way, but especially these systems within the body. Okay, so when we're talking about the signs have a gender, an element, and a modality. And so the four elements are connected to different different energies astrologically, but they're also connected to different neurotransmitters. And so this technique with the neurotransmitters, which I think is so fascinating, is one that I learned from one of my medical astrology teachers, Lynn Coiner. She focuses a little bit more on the lobes of the brain, but I have really taken the neurotransmitters and run with them because that's more aligned with my understanding and background, but also there's a lot more that you can do with it. And these neurotransmitters don't just affect like one lobe of the brain, they affect everything. And so that I can't take credit for. I learned it from her. She's brilliant. She teaches medical astrology too, not as frequently anymore. But if you can get in, that's a thing that you could you could totally do. Um, but I incorporate some of this into medical astrology mastery, of course, because this is how I practice and my background in psychology and my very intense interest in behavioral neuroscience has led me to focus on this quite a bit. Anyway, the earth signs and the water signs, those are both the feminine, more receptive signs, and they are associated with inhibitory neurotransmitters, which means neurotransmitters that have an influence on the brain and body that are more sedating, that are more calming, right? The fire and air signs are associated with excitatory neurotransmitters, which are neurotransmitters that are activating. And so that would make sense, right? Earth signs are associated with GABA, which has to do with your anxiety levels, your sleep. If you are somebody who suffers from anxiety or insomnia or who is just tends to be quite nervous, GABA would be something you would want to look at. And when there is dysfunction with the earth signs, which we'll talk about, there could be issues pertaining to GABA. So GABA is also associated with the temporal lobe, verbal memory. Theta brainwaves are associated with the earth signs. Earth signs are also very structural. They have to do with food and minerals and vitamins, things like that, the growth and maintenance of tissues. Water is associated with serotonin, which is the mood neurotransmitter. It's not the only thing it does, but it's the thing it's most famous for. And so, because there's such a connection between emotion and serotonin, it makes sense that it'd be connected to the water signs. Serotonin is also very important for regulating our sleep-wake cycles. It's connected to delta brainwaves, which are the brainwaves that are activated or that are happening during like deep sleep. The water signs are connected to that. Serotonin is tied to the occipital lobe and visual memory. Water has to do with fluids of the body, essentially. So that's something to really pay attention to if there's issues pertaining to fluids. Air is associated with acetylcholine, which is an excitatory neurotransmitter that has to do with memory and attention. And it's tied to alpha brainwaves, the parietal lobe, and like I said, memory and attention. Air is also tied to the electrical system in the body, communication, our information diet, the breath, breathing, respiration. Those are all air sign qualities. The fire signs are associated with the excitatory neurotransmitter dopamine, which has to do with not just pleasure, but motivation. So, dopamine is what motivates us to act, and it's actually what allows our bodies to actually move and act. So, one of the issues with people who have Parkinson's disease, for example, is that they have low dopamine levels. And so they lose control of their movement, but they actually can't get going a lot of the time. So, there is a connection there with the fire signs as well. It's associated with beta brain waves, the frontal lobe, and working memory. This really has to do with action, motivation, risk taking. It can be very hot, very inflammatory, the fire signs. And so, in Medical Astrology Mastery, we talk a lot about working with the elemental energies to balance and kind of mitigate some of the dysfunction you might see as opposed to struggling against them. Because people, when they have elemental imbalances, they tend to just go all into that imbalance. And so we help bring awareness to that, right? And help people kind of cool off the fire if they need to, or stabilize the earth, or whatever it is that they need. So again, we talk about this more in Medical Astrology Mastery. I'd love to have you guys in class. So there are, in my opinion, three different types of elemental imbalance. Some astrologers will just talk about deficiency versus excess. Lynn Quinter would talk sometimes about like certain planets in Earth not being good Earth. I know Judith Hill has some sort of specific thing she does with the elements that's a little bit different. But the way I look at it is deficiency, excess, and dysregulation. So you might have a deficit in a certain element that could create imbalance in the body and mind. You might have an excess. So you want to maybe calm that element, or you might have a dysregulation where a certain planet doesn't fit well with the element that it's in, or it's causing something kind of wonky. So you have maybe a planet that is in bad dignity, or you have maybe the sun with the south node causing a dysregulation with, let's say it's in Virgo and it's causing a dysregulation with earth, which could be connected to GABA, which would be connected to minerals, which would be connected to the intestines, right? All of these things. And so there are ways to mitigate and work with the dysregulation as well as deficiency and excess. And again, those are things that are beyond the scope of what we can do here today, because I mean, the Medical Astrology Mastery is a 6 to 8 month program, and this is just too deep, but I want to give you guys an understanding of that framework. Okay, so the 10 planets in medical astrology, each planet is connected to the function of a different organ system and specific actions within the body. And the planets are also tied to things like vitamins, minerals, macronutrients, herbs, flower essences, energetic remedies. We talk about all of this in the course. But just to give you an idea, the sun is associated with your life force energy, your vitality, your consciousness, your chi, your heart function, and cellular function are also sun activities. The moon is in medical astrology and traditional astrology, the general significator of the entire body. It also rules the limbic system, memory, bodily rhythms and cycles. It's your eating habits. It also has to do with female hormones and myelination. Mercury is your brain and cognitive function. It's most tied to the nervous system and sensory processing. Also, breath, breathing, respiration through its tie to Gemini because it rules Gemini. Venus, kidneys, kidney function, hormones and endocrine function, glucose metabolism. Venus is sugar. So if you're having issues with blood sugar or anything to do with sugar cravings, Venus might be a role in that. Mars is immune system function, adrenal function. It's also tied to inflammation. It's tied to cortisol and adrenaline. It's tied to sexual function, but also testosterone specifically. It's tied to the blood. We know that it's tied to accidents, injuries, surgeries, cutting, things like that too. It heats things and speeds things up. Jupiter is tied to the function of the liver. It's tied to the cerebrum, higher reasoning skills, gross motor skills. It also has to do with the way that you digest and metabolize fats. So that is something to pay attention to for that. Saturn is the teeth, skeletal system, joints, its ossification and the hardening of tissues. Saturn rules aging, and so you'll often see Saturn implicated in diseases of age. So things that come with age or deteriorate with age or get worse with age. So a lot of things with like hearing difficulties, vision difficulties, dementia, cognitive dysfunction, arthritis, especially. So things like that are very Saturnian. Uranus is tied to electrical impulses, and it just kind of makes things chaotic and erratic when it's involved in a pattern in the birth chart tied to health. Neptune is pineal gland function, allergies. It has to do with poisons and also pharmaceutical drugs and other types of medications, addictions, and substances in general. It can make things leaky and confusing and make things hard to diagnose when you see it part of a pattern of illness. And then Pluto. Pluto has to do with detoxification and also tumors, abscesses, amputation, removal of organs, surgeries are often tied to Pluto. Obsessions and compulsions, certain psychiatric issues have high Pluto connections, also Moon and Mercury connections as well. Okay, so that is the planets. How are you guys doing in the chat so far? Let me know what you're thinking, if this is helpful to you in any way. And we're going to get into the medical astrology houses now. So, as I mentioned before, all houses are medical astrology houses. They provide context and they often represent external environmental factors. They show how and where and why the energies of the signs and planets manifest. They show us how everything is connected to all the things in our lives. But there are 4 houses that I want to give you a quick rundown of that I consider to be the medical astrology houses. I would say most medical astrologers focus more on these houses. And 3 of the 4 happen to be the traditional malefic houses because they're tied to illness and, issues pertaining to mental health and bodily health in hospitals and all these things. Whereas the first house is the house of the self, but it's also the house of your physical incarnation. We incarnate into the physical body through our ascendant. And so the first house is very much tied to not just your appearance, but your physical body as a whole. It's very tied in with the general constitution of your body, whether you are generally strong or a little bit more weak, how resilient you are, and things that might be issues physically throughout your lifetime can show up connected to the first house and the first house ruler. So working with the first house can be very effective in really enhancing your wellness overall and your vitality overall. The 6th house, of course, we all know is the house of physical health, but also illness. Specifically, it's the house of illness, but it can show you what you need for wellness through health routines. It's very tied into nutrition and eating habits. Eating habits are very much the 6th house and not the 2nd. We don't use the 12-letter alphabet version of the planet signs and houses in any of my courses, and we don't use it in medical astrology. It just simply does not work that way in my direct experience. And I've tried all of it. I've tried both. I started with the 12-letter alphabet, and once I switched out of that, it works so much better. The houses are not the signs are not the houses. If you need to get a deeper dive into that, make sure you check out the Cosmic Academy of Astrology, where you build your foundations for astrology in level one in a way that's going to help you understand medical astrology better. So, with that being said, sixth house, health and illness. The eighth house is tied to psychological health. Often, when there's an eighth house connection to a sixth house problem or a first house problem, even, there is a trauma component or a fear component or a psychological component to a physiological illness. And so, addressing the physiological is important, but also when you suss out the emotional and psychological and trauma connection, that tends to facilitate an opening up where either healing starts to happen naturally or you're able to finally find the correct modalities. So I love looking at the eighth house even for physical health, but it's especially associated with psychological health. You'll see a lot of psychological issues tied to the eighth house, especially addictions, trauma, PTSD, obsessive compulsive disorder, certain forms of anxiety, suicidal ideation, like so many different things are connected to the eighth house. So, because I look at mental health too and mental health issues, the eighth house is a big one. 12th house is also big with mental health, but it can also be big for physical health because it's the opposite of the sixth house. And so, just like there's a referred influence in the different modalities with the signs, there can be a referred influence in the house that opposes the house, right? So, the sixth house and the 12th house, because they're on an axis, can both be tied to physical health issues. And the 12th house is the house of hospitals, it's the house of rehabilitation centers, it's the house of psychiatric institutions, and it's also very tied to addiction and mental illness. And so you want to look at that house. Also, planets in the 12th house are often considered to be weakened by them being in the 12th house because it is that malefic house and it's this hidden house and it's a very non-physical house. And so you'll find that often 12th house planets can be very tied to patterns of disease. So they're planets that you want to work with actively in your wellness practices in order to facilitate better health and hopefully mitigate the challenges that could present themselves as illness later on down the line. Okay, so in Medical Astrology Mastery, we not only teach you how to evaluate the chart for general wellness, but we look at specific things too. So you'll get a whole slew of significations and patterns to look at for nutrition and food. And you'll get a whole slew of patterns to look at for movement and exercise. You'll get a whole slew of patterns to look at for sleep and issues pertaining to sleep and all these different things that are more general for building up the body and just going about your day-to-day life in a way that's going to align your wellness with your birth chart. We also talk about this in some of my celestial self-healing workshops. In Celestial Vitality, for example, we look at the basics of a health and wellness routine based on the birth chart and how to create that. So the difference between what goes on in Medical Astrology Mastery and in my workshops is that Medical Astrology Mastery is for astrologers who want to learn the whole system of medical astrology. The Celestial Self-Healing workshops, including Celestial Vitality, Celestial Nourishment, which is about food and nutrition, very deep into nutrition, and Celestial Self-Care, which is about nervous system regulation and sleep, is that those three workshops are more appropriate for beginners and people who are just not as well versed in astrology. They're more geared toward you working with your own chart and maybe incorporating it a little bit into readings if you're someone who does readings. Whereas, you're going to get everything in Medical Astrology Mastery. And so, that said, evaluating the chart for general wellness, there are 7 key placements that you should look at to see if somebody is just in general more susceptible to illness and poor health. We all know people who are just vibrant and thriving and they're just always doing good and they can take all these hits and they can eat garbage and they're still running perfectly fine. Their bodies are running perfectly fine. And then we know other people who do all the things and are always, working on their health and maybe they even have a really great attitude about it, but they're dealing with so many illnesses and issues. These seven placements are the key to understanding why one person is one way and another person is another way. Most of us fall somewhere in the middle. We'll have positive indicators and challenging indicators, but some people are very much on either end of the spectrum. And so that's important to understand as a baseline assessment of a birth chart if you're looking at somebody's health. And so the things that you're going to want to look at are the first house and ascendant, which we talked about how that's the self and physical body, the ascendant ruler. So the planet that rules the sign that occupies the first house in whole sign houses, the traditional planet. So that's Sun through Saturn. That is going to be your ascendant ruler. And that gives you an additional insight into the body and overall constitution. The sun is very important for vitality and life force energy. And the moon is the general significator of the body. So your big three in normal astrology are part of these placements that are really important to look at in medical astrology. But you also want to look at, of course, the sixth house, which is health and illness and your wellness routines and patterns, what you need nutritionally and movement wise, and all of those things. And the sixth house ruler. So again, the planet that rules the sign that occupies the sixth house in whole sign houses, not in Placidus, not in any other quadrant house system, in whole sign houses. And we're looking at the traditional ruler, so not Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. Um, that is going to be another planet that's going to be hugely impactful for your health. And when that planet is afflicted in your birth chart, it can indicate weakness. If it's strengthened and there's a beautiful grand trine and it's in good dignity and it's exaltation, then your health is strengthened. And if it's somewhere in between and you have a transit coming up that's really beneficial, you could go through a healing breakthrough. If you have something that's really hard coming up, then you can know that you might need to brace yourself and prepare your body so that way you can kind of mitigate the challenges to your health. The lot of fortune is another secondary indicator of general health. It's specifically things and factors that impact our bodies that are beyond our control. Because the lot of fortune is the lot of the moon, I talk about this. We have a whole lesson on lot of fortune in Medical Astrology Mastery, but I also have a workshop on the lots of fortune and spirit where we talk about this a little bit, but we get into all the Hermetic lots and specifically all the different things about lot of fortune. So that might be interesting to some of you. But these are the seven main indicators that I would be looking at just to assess someone's vitality, their wellness, right? And then from there, the things people are going to be asking the most about is, you know, diseases, illnesses, symptoms, things that they are trying to overcome, but they need a little extra boost or a little extra help with. And so, disease patterns or illness signatures, that refers to essentially multiple overlapping chart placements that are seen across charts for many people with the same illness. So, basically, what you would do here is you would gather like 10 at least different charts for people who have the exact same diagnosis. And you would look to see what is coming up time and time again. And I've done this with so many different diseases, and our students have done this with so many different diseases. And we actually have a whole data bank of everybody's final projects where they have to research patterns for a specific disease. So you have a whole database of patterns of different illnesses. But anyone can do this with any um, illness once they've gone through medical astrology mastery. So you can look into anything because there's just like limitless numbers of problems and diagnoses these days. So basically, it's not that one particular placement or pattern is connected to disease. And placements and patterns don't cause disease either. Two people can have similar signatures. One person will get, an illness that is connected to those patterns, another person doesn't. The reasons for this are that environmental factors and the choices you're making play a big role. And also, you have to have this perfect storm of all the disease patterns, multiple placements connected to a certain disease, along with environmental factors and life choices, along with the perfect storm of transits and other astrological activations that come up and sort of attack those patterns all at once for a disease to develop. And so, this is a complicated, nuanced interpretive skill in medical astrology that really requires a solid structure and foundation in medical astrology to master. This isn't something that you just do. This is something that is very advanced in medical astrology, which is why I don't do a lot of this on YouTube because people kind of take it and run with it in a weird direction. And I don't want to be a part of that. I want to be a part of responsible, ethical medical astrology. But that's what you're going to get and you're going to build in Medical Astrology Mastery. But I'm going to give you a quick example of what that looks like so you guys have a better idea. So, for example, um, there's no one specific placement in the birth chart that corresponds with anxiety, for example. Like most people who have a combust Mercury will have racing thoughts and trouble quieting their inner dialogue, trouble quieting their minds. And Mercury combust, for those who don't know, is Mercury within a 15-degree conjunction of the sun, but not an exact conjunction. That's different. It's cazimi. And Mercury has to be, not in Virgo and not in Gemini for this to hold true as well. So if you have a combust Mercury, your brain is super strong. You are usually highly intelligent, but you can't turn it off. It's just like a constant mental chatter. There's a lot. So you'll have that, right, with Mercury combust. But that doesn't mean you're going to have anxiety. If you have Mercury combust with other signatures that show anxiety, that can be part of the pattern because it does bring that like mental overload and that nervous system overload. But it's not the only thing. That alone won't give connection to an anxiety disorder. And then, even then, you have to have the right life circumstances, the right activations, maybe multiple activations for something chronic like that to show up in your life through the transits. And so here's an example of a chart for a client who has diagnosed generalized anxiety disorder. And this is somebody who has a lot of different significations and patterns that you see really commonly with anxiety. So, this person does have Mercury combust. That's one of the connections we talked about. So, the sun is at 17 degrees in the sign of Cancer, and Mercury is at 26 degrees in the sign of Cancer in the 12th house. And so, that is one pattern. But they have a lot of other things going on too. And so the sun is also conjunct Chiron. And this is somebody who also has a lot of social anxiety. You can see by the ruler of the 11th house, which has to do with socializing and friendship and things like that, being in the 12th house, that they would be shy. Ruler of the ascendant is also in the 12th house, indicating shyness, especially in a water sign. And then that conjunction to Chiron there with this connection to the 11th and the first house can indicate awkwardness and social anxiety. Um, the sun, ruler of the, yeah, so I already said all of those. Mercury combust, and then sun and Mercury are square Mars. So it's very common to have the sun conjunct, opposition, or square Mars with people who have anxiety. And it's also very common to have Mercury conjunct, opposing or square Mars with people who have anxiety. It's also common to have Mercury, this one's peregrine, but it's common to have it maybe in a more negative position, like in its detriment or something like that too. You'll sometimes see. Uranus opposing the sun is another common signature for anxiety. This person has Uranus at 7 degrees in the sign of Capricorn, opposing the sun in Cancer at 17 degrees. So that's a wide conjunction, but still it counts for sure. And also Saturn opposing Mercury. There can be a withholding of information. There could be fear around speaking up or public speaking or just sharing information because there's a fear of being disregarded or seen as unintelligent for whatever reason. Usually it's tied to early childhood experience, but it's another one that's common with anxiety. So this person actually has a T square between Saturn, Mercury, and Mars, right? And it's in the cardinal signs. And so that can indicate, especially with Mars being in Aries, issues pertaining to the endocrine system and the sympathetic nervous system through its connection to the adrenals and the adrenal hormones. So this is like a whole pattern here, right? This isn't just one thing. You can see how this person has all the perfect storm of things to have not just anxiety and not just generalized anxiety disorder, but specifically social anxiety and issues in social situations. And it shows up here. And it's not just because it's here. I mean, this person would naturally be more prone to these things just at baseline at birth, but their environment growing up would have had to facilitate that in one way or another. And then they would have probably multiple activations that showed up during pivotal moments in time that exacerbated the problem and turned it into a chronic condition. And so that's how medical astrology works for disease and illness. Okay, so now that we are through that part, I want you guys to let me know in the chat, why do you want to learn medical astrology? Do you want to learn medical astrology because it's just interesting, or because you're an astrologer and you want to learn a new modality? Is it because you want to help clients? Is it because you want to understand yourself? Is it because you yourself are struggling with something that you're trying to get answers to? Is it because you have a friend or someone you care about that needs a little bit of assistance? What is your why? Let me know in the chat. I'll be in the chat with you. And so I'll be very interested to hear all of that. And so is it because you want to help yourself or help your friends? Wendy LeBlanc, who is one of our Medical Astrology Mastery graduates, she had no prior knowledge of medical astrology when she enrolled in Medical Astrology Mastery, but because of many medical issues with her husband, her family, her friends, she wanted to understand and know how and why these things are happening. She believed if she knew more, she would be able to help herself and help this and use this important information to help her family and friends in their journey to healing. And so she said that she found the course fascinating and she learned so much, and that she did this not to become a professional astrologer, but now that she's completed the program, she's actually able to help her friends and family better, knowing more about their astrological placements and how they're affected through the lens of medical astrology. Are you somebody who is a healer like Virginia? So Virginia is one of our Medical Astrology Mastery graduates. She said when she started, her medical astrology understanding was basic and when she enrolled in the course, but she decided to enroll because she's a healer. And she said that she loved Medical Astrology Mastery. Thank you, Virginia. And that it made a lot of sense. But she said when she completed the course, she's now able to bridge astrology with healthcare, and she's applying medical astrology in her healing practice now. And so that's another way that you can use medical astrology. It works really well. It's not a replacement for other healing modalities. It works best when you can use it to guide other forms of healing, right? Because medical astrology itself doesn't heal you, it serves as a source of information. Or are you a professional astrologer like Kate, who is one of my favorite students from the Cosmic Academy of Astrology and a graduate of Medical Astrology Mastery? Hello, Kate, if you're watching. She said before enrolling Medical Astrology Mastery, her level of astrology knowledge was of medical astrology knowledge was just the basics. So sixth house and ruler, aspects to the sixth house, things like that. She was worried at the beginning that the course wouldn't be useful because she's not a healthcare provider, but she wanted to be the best astrologer she can be. And she's always diving in and just getting more and more knowledge. And Kate is on our directory of graduates for both Medical Astrology Mastery and the Cosmic Academy of Astrology. So when you graduate and you get your certification, you get added to the directory. And so you can find her there on my website if you want to book a reading with her, which I recommend because she's great. Any of our students are great, but yeah. And she said the thing that she loved most about Medical Astrology Mastery was the research project. That's my favorite part too, because I'm a nerd. She really felt like she grew from that. She was planning on continuing the research she started for the course. She said that my courses are all great. By far, the foundation she got in the program exceeds what she's been able to piece together in the past. And she finally feels like she has the foundation she needs to address medical issues in readings. After completing the course, she's giving medical astrology readings to clients. Yay. And she's also using the knowledge with her family. Her and her daughter both have chronic conditions, and having a good foundation in medical astrology is empowering them to analyze their charts and find support that will help them both navigate their health journeys. So multifaceted for Kate. Um, and so this is where we talk about Medical Astrology Mastery, as I promised you at the beginning. Medical Astrology Mastery is a self-paced, fully supported immersion into the ancient technical art of medical astrology. This is for astrologers who are ready to transform their practice and deliver life-changing medical astrology readings with confidence and clarity. If that's you, enrollment is now open and you'll get 30% off when you join us between now and February 11th at 11:59 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. And so I'm super excited to kind of walk you through Medical Astrology Mastery. The link should be popping up in the chat too if you want to go and jump to the website, which has all of this information and then some, and a lot of FAQ about the program. You can also ask your questions in the chat right now about the program or about anything that we've just talked about. And you can email us too if you have questions. So, Medical Astrology Mastery is completely self-paced. It is self-paced video lectures that layer the foundational knowledge of medical astrology and then some, very logically and strategically. So you get the right foundations and then you build your way up to chart research and disease signatures. It also includes, with each module and each lesson, strategically designed quizzes to help test your retention, but also assignments that are specifically created to help you practice medical astrology as you're learning and build and integrate your medical astrology practice every step of the way. This is how Medical Astrology Mastery is very different from pretty much any other medical astrology course I've found. If you liked the Cosmic Academy of Astrology, we've structured this in a very similar way, and we get excellent results for our students. It also includes monthly recorded Q&A calls with me and our wonderful expert medical astrology teaching assistant, Chelsea, who you saw in the video we did together yesterday. We collaborated on an interesting video where we looked at the impact of the current crazy astrology and what that might mean for health and our connection with the body as a collective. So, you're going to receive these. So basically what happens is every month we have a form that throughout the month you can fill out your questions, and me and Chelsea go in and we do research, we prep charts. You can even submit charts that you want us to look at, and we record all the answers. And the reason we do it this way is so we can prepare really well in advance, and you get basically new mini lessons in medical astrology every single month. So that's going to help you. You're going to get direct feedback and information from me and from Chelsea. And Chelsea's there to answer all of your questions whenever they come up via email or in our student community, which you have forever access to. We also have anatomy and physiology lessons that are included that are taught by a qualified healthcare professional, Nurse Matt, who is my husband. He's a bachelor's of science in nursing and a registered nurse. And he really knows his anatomy and physiology. So he came in and taught that. So if you are an astrologer with no background in health, that don't understand the body systems, you're going to get exactly what you need there as a bonus. You also will get lifetime access to everything in the course and the opportunity to earn a certificate of completion at the end of the course after submitting your final research project. Zechariah, another one of my favorite students, said that he loved that he was getting information that really couldn't be found anywhere. People aren't teaching this stuff. He loved that throughout the course, his classmates were also healers of different modalities. I love that too, because I learned so many things from the students in this course. We have a lot of like herbalists, psychics, mediums, tarot readers, astrologers, nurses, chiropractors, medical professionals, like he says. It was such an incredible spread of people to be learning alongside, and he said he felt honored and privileged to be a part of it. So these are the exact things you're going to be learning in the course, and I'm going to go through this and then we'll head out for the day. In module 0, you're going to get basically your prerequisites, similar to what you just saw here, but a little bit more in depth. So you're already ahead of the game. You're ready if you just watch this whole workshop to dive in. And so that's what you're getting in the prerequisite module. Then we get into module 1, which is where the real action happens. So we're going to go deep into every single planet. We're going to talk about not just the functions, but how they interact with the zodiac signs and how they impact different parts of the body, the specific ways that the planets operate in medical astrology beyond just the different bodily systems. And we'll also talk about connections between the planets and different herbs. We talk about different nutrients. We talk about Bach flower essences. We also talk about how to integrate the psychological and physiological impacts of the planets for a medical astrology reading. And so that's module 1. Catherine says, I really love the inclusion of vitamins, minerals, herbs, and Bach flower remedies associated with the planets. These were really cool and actually offer something tangible that may help. In module 2, we're going to talk about the zodiac signs. We're going to get deeper into the modalities and elements and elemental balance and those referred influences and the different systems and how they all connect in medical astrology. And so you got a taste of that today, but it's just so much deeper. You can't just do it in even a couple of hours. So, and then we start to put it all together. So each new layer of information gets a putting it all together module where we show you how these things work. So what does it look like when certain planets are in different zodiac signs for a medical astrology reading? In module 3, you're going to learn about all the 12 houses. So you'll get an introduction to the 12 houses and the context that they provide. You'll also learn about planetary aspects and you'll put it all together to give a basic medical astrology natal chart interpretation. Then in module 4, this is where we have a big, deep lesson for each of the 4 main medical astrology houses. And then we also incorporate house rulerships, which gives you additional nuance and so much accuracy. These are so important for really understanding what's going on, especially with illness, but also with wellness. And we're going to do a demonstration of how this works when we incorporate rulerships for these 4 houses into our medical astrology reading. Then in module 5, our final official module, you're going to learn about evaluating the birth chart for overall health and different ways of looking at health and wellness and health care routines through the birth chart. This is also where I threw in the lot of fortune in medical astrology just because it doesn't really fit in other places and requires a lot of background information for it to make sense. And so I put that here because it's part of evaluating the chart for overall health. This is also where you're going to get into disease signatures and medical chart research, and you're also going to be doing your medical astrology final research project guided by me and by Chelsea. And we kind of show you what that looks like, and you get to see some of my chart research in these modules as well with specific illnesses. I believe we look at Hashimoto's disease. I know we look at anxiety. I can't remember off the top of my head what the other ones are, but they're all also in the student community. There's a whole section where we have a whole database of everybody's chart research too. Kate said, I love the research project the most. I never thought I'd say that, but comparing charts and really looking for certain health signatures was fascinating. This course provided everything, theory, practice, research, and community, all in the perfect package. I love that. This should be like the first thing you see on my website. Okay. And then doing the final assignments is giving me hands-on experience and thinking about how I'd actually do a medical astrology reading. So that's really the point of the final assignments. I really want you to be prepared to go out in the world and use this with people. We also have bonus lessons. So we have a whole lesson on Chiron in medical astrology. We also look at Trans-Pluto, which plays a special role in diabetes and insulin resistance and PCOS and certain illnesses. And Trans-Pluto, if you guys don't know, is a hypothetical planet that's calculated based on the irregularities in the orbits of Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. We don't know if it exists or not, but there's something there. There's a gravitational pull. And so I use Trans-Pluto in my readings and in my medical astrology readings because it works. And my teacher, Lynn Coiner, uses Trans-Pluto. She's like a big Trans-Pluto person. And for whatever reason, it works. I just care that it works. Ceres in medical astrology is very tied to issues pertaining to diet and food sensitivities. Other things too, like especially eating disorders. So we talk about all of that. And then, of course, we have a whole lesson on ethical and legal considerations in medical astrology, because that is a big concern that astrologers have in practicing medical astrology. And so we cover the basics of that in this course. So that way you can practice safely and responsibly, because that's really important. Tara says the course enhanced with understanding of medical astrology. It also helped me focus on proper intake to evaluate a chart for medical astrology, as well as legal and ethical concerns. I'm more interested in general and want to keep learning more and collecting charts so I can see patterns coinciding with medical conditions. You'll also get the obviously anatomy and physiology lessons with Nurse Matt. Those are super popular. Kate says, I've learned more from Nurse Matt's lessons than when I was studying anatomy and physiology at university. So thank you for those, as they help things click more for me. That is a huge compliment. I mean, he's good, but he's a, you know, that's a really big compliment. He's been teaching first aid and CPR and wilderness first aid for quite some time. He doesn't do it anymore or any of this anymore, but yeah, he's got some skills. And then we'll skip over this, but there's just more. We have so many testimonials. You can see a lot of them on the website. A lot of great feedback. And we used feedback from our students to really build this course and develop it in a way that just works really, really well. So I'm very proud of what we've created here. So just a reminder, you can save 30% on enrollment until 11:59 p.m. Mountain Standard Time on Wednesday, February 11th, when you enroll in Medical Astrology Mastery. And so Medical Astrology Mastery is a comprehensive professional level training. So it's not just a one-off thing. It usually takes people like 6 to 8 months to complete, but you can do it in as much or as little time as possible. If you want to complete it in 6 to 8 months, I recommend setting aside about 2 hours a week, which is, I think, less than 30 minutes a day. It's like 20 minutes a day. But you can also, take your time with it and take a little bit longer. The full price for this course is normally $1,299. But because you're here live and because I do want the right astrologers to do this work, we are having a special enrollment where your price is 30% off, so $909.30. So you're going to save $389.70. But we also offer affordable payment plan options. Our most popular payment plan is 9 payments of $159, but right now it's only going to be $111.30. And for this enrollment period only, we're actually offering a more extended payment plan so more people can have access to this work. And so 12 payments of only $83.30 if you want to extend it out a little bit more. Every option includes full lifetime access to the program, all the future updates to the program, the live support, the support from my teaching assistant, the Q&As, all of it. So the only difference is really how you decide to structure the investment. The link, again, is in the sidebar here. I really hope to see some of you guys in class. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for being here. I can't wait to invite some new medical astrologers into the student community, into Medical Astrology Mastery, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye, everyone. Oh, don't forget, live Q&A. Sorry, live medical astrology Q&A is happening on Tuesday at 11:15 p.m. with me and Chelsea as a follow-up to this workshop. So definitely tune in for that if you have questions and you want them answered. All right. Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.